Hi, this is Eric from Cafe Watercolor. Thank you for joining me, and welcome to another painting demo. Today we're going to look at a large-scale landscape painting of Wicklow Mountain in Ireland. So I apologize for not having any footages of me drawing, and that was due to I forgot to hit the record button when I start to draw, and when I realized that my drawing is already done. So I apologize, so we have to start with the first wash. But the drawing is not really a very complicated one, so you guys are not missing that much. What I basically do is pretty much just some indication where the mountains are, or where the buildings are, and the rough location of the trees, and some ideas of the scale of the building. And you can see that they are smaller as they go into the distance. And for a large-scale landscape painting like this, you don't have to be obsessed about accuracy, because what you really need to do here is to establish the depths, the scale, and just the overall feeling of the place. And this painting is actually inspired by my friend Cory Miller's vlog. He has to spend some time alone, so he went to this place. He basically did his vlog there and share about his struggles and things like that. And there's one shot of his vlog. He stand on his hill and he looked down at this view, and I saw this view is very, very beautiful. And on top of that, the feeling of he needing a quiet time, it just really inspires me. So I decided to do this scenery, even though I never been to this place. I wish I can one day. So back to the painting. What I do for the first wash is have plenty of water, and because I paint tilted, the water will flow down and gather in the bottom and forming into a bead. And that bead is served as sort of an indication. When this bead is there, I can continue down and the gradation will be smooth. So I am able to make a very smooth and nice clean wash by using the bead. This is very necessary for the first wash. And the first wash for this painting specifically is basically to establish the atmosphere. So the sky color is a little bit cooler, towards more blue and purple. And as it reaches to the ground, I start to warm up the color to have a little bit more green tone into it. I don't own any tube of green. The closest thing I have is cobalt turquoise, and that's more of a blue-green color. And I use that as a base and mix with yellow ochre or Anson yellow and to make nice warm green color. So that is Cory right there. He is standing on that rock and looking down and taking a photo of the view. But because of that, I have to find several references for this place. Now this is another image that I found online. It has a lot of nice details, but the lighting is a little bit different. The color is a little bit different. So I'm pretty much trying to combine both images. I like the foggy feeling of the image that Cory took. This one has a lot more information for me to reference from, for me to work with. Now there's a lot of details, so that also means that I need to fight off the temptation to paint too much detail into my painting. I'm making a painting, not a photocopy. So all I really need to capture is the scale and the depths. So to really have the feeling of looking down into the distance is very important for this painting. Now I add a little bit more paint and drop into the wash to make the bead a little bit bigger. And when you do that, you're forming a little bit more bead that will make the wash last a little bit longer. As long as the bead is there, you can continue down the wash. So you see me feeding it a little bit more paint, a little bit more water, so I can take a little bit more time to continue down. Now you might notice that I kind of skip around for a little bit of white and highlight, and those are sort of suggestive details that I sort of just do it randomly and sometimes it happened by accident. But those are really good things because it gonna give you some visual break, and it will suggest some details in the background. So they might be the highlight of maybe rocks or houses and things like that, because when the house is that far off, you don't really see a lot of details. You see a little bit suggestion of the roof and the highlight, and basically they're just shapes. They're just visual languages. Now as the wash comes down, I'm painting things that are closer to me, so I need to make the color a little bit darker and a little bit warmer. So you can start to see me adding a little bit more warm colors such as yellow ochre, and if I want to make it really warm green, I will have cobalt turquoise mixing with orange or Hansen yellow. It is important to have different shades of green. You don't only just have this grassy green colors. And green is sort of this color that if you don't give it enough variation, it can look pretty dead. So usually the green that I like to mix are a little bit warmer because it gives a little bit more sense of light, a little bit more sense of life. Now I be a little bit more careful and cut around the roof of the house, and at the same time I try not to let the bee dry. So when you do a large scale landscape painting like these, for me the challenge is to keep my eyes on the overall wetness. So in this case, because I want the wash to continue down, so when I slow down and cut around the house and try to be a little bit more careful, I also need to be mindful that the paint is drying, and I need to feed it a little bit more water and paint, or I just need to finish what I'm doing really quickly and continue the wash down. So for this painting, this is a general principle. From far to near, you have lighter value to darker value, and you have cooler color in the far distant to warmer color that's more towards the foreground. So lighter and cooler push the things back, and darker and warmer pull the things forward. And the reason for that is because of the atmosphere. We call that the atmospheric perspective or aerial perspective. Well, basically what that is the things that are more in the distance is covered by more atmosphere. There are more airs, there are more fogs. So it sort of merged with the sky color. But the things that are closer to you, there's less air between you and that thing, so you see more of its true color. So in this case, grass are greener and warmer as it gets closer to you. They are the same grass, but because of the air and the atmosphere and the fog, they appear differently. So I leave the river white. You can see that in the photo. There's some rivers that goes into the distance, so I'm painting around it and preserve the light for the river. Now we are almost done with the first wash. Now I'm making the green even warmer in the foreground. And now one thing to keep in mind is that this first wash will dry a lot lighter. So don't be afraid to make your mixture a little bit darker, because you do use quite a bit of water. So the more water in your mixture, the lighter it will dry. just splattering some paint on it and just make a little bit interesting details. And when I do that while it's still very wet, it will pretty much just face off anyways. So just having a little bit of fun. Now the first wash is dry, and as you can see, it's dry a lot lighter. And what I do right now is to re-wet the background. And I come back with a very cool color for the background mountain. And because I pre-wetted the surface, any paint I put in will become very soft because the paint will spread out in the water that I just put down. And this is great for the mountains and buildings and whatever it is that you're painting. And this is great because the softness will really give you that misty feeling in the background way into the distance. I hit the dry area and you can start to see that there's bead forming again. And I will use that bead and continue down as a second wash. So the bottom of the mountain is also closer, so I make them a little bit darker and a little bit greener. Now even though this is in the distance, I don't want to make everything soft. I still want some separations between the trees and the grass, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm merely suggesting the shape of the tree. And the thing about painting a large-scale landscape like this is that there are thousands of trees, and painting them one by one is just not a good idea. It becomes very repetitive and it becomes way too busy very quickly. So group your shape together is very, very important. And the trees in the background like this, they are very, very tiny anyway, so to make them into one single shape is very important. Now it is worth noting that this shot is shot by a wide-angle camera lens. So whenever you have this sort of wide-angle shot, to copy it one-to-one from photo to your painting is usually not a good idea because the perspective is more extreme and things become much smaller. And when the things become very small, you actually kind of lose that sense of scale. Try to add some trees in the background mountains. So just a couple dots and a couple brush strokes to get that distant tree in the mist feeling. Now I'm dropping some dark value in the bottom of the trees. Now what those are doing is that gives you a form, because the trees are three-dimensional things. So on the top of the tree, they're catching the light from the sky. Even though this is an overcast day, the sky is still emitting a very, very bright light. A very soft lighting, but it's a very bright light. So what I'm trying to do is to give it some form by give it some shadow in the bottom. So that gives you a little bit read of form. And that's again the visual language. When you see light on the top and the darkness on the bottom, your mind will start to read it as form. This will look very abstract actually, because I'm not painting individual trees. And that is very important. I feel like I'm a broken record, but the very important thing is that you're painting shapes. You're not painting trees, you're painting shapes. Is this shape that made up by thousands of trees? And if you get that shape down, if you get that form down, with a little bit suggest tree shapes and shadows and some value changes, you get a very convincing landscape. And the thing about visual language is that the less you can give, the better. The simpler the message, the better. If you have to describe every single tree, every single leaf on every single tree, you pretty much over provide the information. And whereas there's so much information in your painting, it could look good, but then it could be very tired to look at. It's sort of like the internet today. Every single day there's so much information that just flooding us. And I find that the more we know, the more information we obtain, we don't feel better, we actually feel more confused and conflict. And I think this is the same thing for the painting. If you provide so much information in your painting, it can be actually tiring to look at. And when you do that, the message you want to convey actually got lost. So I use a smaller brush and start to put some dots, and those are just trees, like little trees, because even though I'm painting big shapes, a little bit hint of smaller shape can help the scale. So little dots like trees and some horizontal line, those can be the shadows, or just some landscape details, some roads and some bushes, whatever it is. And those lines can help the form to read, because this valley is formed by the mountain on both sides, so it creates this curve downward to the middle. And the lines that sort of follow that form can help to build that sense of valley. So more trees. And it's important to vary your brushstroke. Don't just use one type of brushstroke for every single one of them. And also, you're not trying to make a pattern, you're making a painting. So try to randomize your brushstroke a little bit. That will make things look a little bit more natural. Painting some trees that lines up next to the road. Now when I put those in, you start to see the road leading into the distance. And that's quite interesting because I didn't paint the road itself, but it's the things that next to the road that make you see it. Now we hit the building and I slow down quite a bit, looking at the reference to have some darker tree behind the buildings. Those are very important because those darker shade behind the buildings will help the building to pop out. Doing stuff like this is very easy to get caught up by the details, because when you're painting something that small and you're looking at the reference, you will tend to try to find as much detail as you can when you paint those. So it's very easy to get lost in this. I have to constantly remind myself that this is only a small part of a huge landscape. So even though the house is a little bit more sophisticated, it's important not to be over-invested in it. Some darker value under the roof that gives a nice sense of form. And there's one trees here, and there's some couple trees standing along there. And those fence are basically just one stroke. I don't need to paint every plank and every wooden stud there. You only need one stroke for that. Now as I get down to more of a foreground element, the tree becomes bigger and the brushstroke are a little bit broader. Now the tree becomes bigger and the colors are a little bit warmer. So I can't believe this is already June, so 2017 is already halfway through. But I was pretty excited of what happened lately to my YouTube channel. There's a lot of people finding value there and they subscribe, and quite a few people sign up on my website. I got quite a bit of emails and either questions or suggestions, and I really appreciate all of you. And I'm still working on my online course that's set to release in August. So my monthly painting demo video might have a pause on July, so I can focus working on the online course. I will be covering a lot of things from basic drawing, perspective, form, to the basic of watercolor, the first, second wash, the color mixing, things like that. And I'll also go over some advanced stuff such as visual language, composition, subject matter, and things like that. If you're interested in a list of lessons that I'm going to put in my course, you can click on the link down below. That will link you to my website and one of my blog posts that gives you a list of the lessons that I'm planning to put in my course. So now I'm doing the creek. Now it's quite simple to do, but the key is to keep it clean. So I basically do a very clean wash just inside of the creek area. And I paint in a little bit of shadow to suggest the form turning from the grass field into the creek, so the creek feels like it's recessing. So the creek feel like it recess a little bit lower. And while that wash is still wet, I drop in some paint to suggest some reflections of the trees and the bush that's next to the creek. And when you have that transition from light to dark, from cool to warm, it really establishes some great depths that you really need for this type of large-scale landscape. Here I glaze over the foreground with some darker value. It needs to be darker than the middle ground so it will pull forward. At this stage, you really need to look at your painting as a whole. You need to ask yourself, is the whole painting working together as an image? Is the scale working? Is the depth working? How's the composition looking? So now I'm starting to work on the foreground tree on the right. Now even before I start to paint this area, I know this area is going to be a little bit tricky because this is a huge dark shape. So if I don't treat it right, if I don't paint it right, it can look pretty dead and it can look really heavy. To keep it fresh is very important, so I basically mix the right value and just try to keep it in one wash. So what I do is I paint this all in one shape, give a little bit of variation in this dark green tone, so a little bit warmer on the bottom and slightly cooler in the back. And before the wash is dry, I splatter some paint on it. I tap my brush with clean water so that gives a little bit texture to break up that huge clump of dark shape. And then I drop in some waters, and because I paint tilted, those water will flow down and carry the paint down, and it will wash off some of the paint, and that creates the light of the tree. And that gives the tree a little bit of lighter value without making it too contrasty. So if you squint your eyes, it's still one value group, but it has enough variation to keep it from looking dead and to have this fresh quality to it. And I just come back in with some darker mixture paint to separate the shape and to break up the shape a little bit, just to give it a little bit more variation. So with those texture working together, you start to see a lot of trees, but they still work together as one value group. Now I start working on the foreground, so as you can see there's quite a bit of small rocks. Well, I call them small because they're small in the photo, but they're probably huge when you look up close in person. Just compare the size of the rock and the trees and the buildings. Some of those rocks are actually very big, but anyways, you're seeing it very far away, so they look small. And those rocks are in the foreground. So I utilize those highlights that I left either by accident or by plan, whatever it is, but you can start using those highlights and put some dark value underneath, and there you have some rocks. And now it looks pretty good overall. And I'm trying to figure out where else I should paint. And when you find yourself thinking about what more can you paint, usually means that you're done. And you should just start to wrap it up, otherwise you will overwork it. Now what's left to do is just to give a little bit more finer details. But in terms of the whole picture, if you look at it as a whole picture, it's pretty much done. But I don't feel enough depths established, especially the foreground, so I come back in and glaze over the bottom, which is the foreground. And that helps the viewer to read the depths from foreground to the midground. And here we have it. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like, comment, and if you're new here, feel free to subscribe to my channel. Please also visit my website at cafewatercolor.com. Visit my store, and this painting is for sale. And I also recently put out some bookmark set. Be sure to go check it out if you want to support me. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.